The Cloudcast is sponsored by Intel Cloud for All, driving the creation of tens of thousands of clouds.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast here in 2016. Thank you to everybody who has been listening, everybody who's been telling a friend. Just me today. Aaron is off doing some other stuff, but kicking the year off really with some fun stuff this year. Like we always say, we're always trying to evolve. We're always trying to focus a little more on some topics that we maybe hadn't covered in the past. And today we've got kind of a fun show because we've got a guest that has been on for a while, so sort of knows the show, knows what we've been through, but is working on some very, very cool stuff. So welcome aboard, James Urquhart, who's now, let me see if I'm going to get this right, Senior Vice President, Performance Analytics at SOASTA. James, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's really good to be back, Brian, and I always hark back to the old days when at Cisco, where we were both at for a while, and those heady early days of the cloud conversation, and it's awesome to see Cloudcast kind of grow through all of that. So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. It's always fun to talk to you because to a certain extent, you're a big thinker. But what I'm kind of excited about is, I mean, you've been talking about distributed systems for a long time. You've been talking about kind of things that are changing at scale, the types of sort of new thinking that have to go on. And back when we were working together at Cisco, and to a certain extent when you were working at other stuff, you were working at Instradius and all, it was kind of in that space, but it didn't feel like it was at the core. And now it's at the core of what you're doing. Tell us what you're doing these days and what you're doing at SOASTA.
So I spent some time at a company called Instradius, then Instradius, then Dell Cloud Manager. And I actually skipped, believe it or not, a name in there. I had 4 names within 2 years, but we're in the cloud management space, and that was really a big part of my focus of my career from the late 90s until not very long ago, was really focusing a lot on deployment and operations of distributed systems and the issues you run into as you get to mostly enterprise scale problems, which, back in the day, that was the big scale. Nowadays, there's some online businesses that are much higher scale, but increasingly you see the enterprises getting into the same problems. And so DevOps, cloud computing, obviously, very big topics in my life for a long time. And with this change, I stepped back and said, I've been in the delivery of cloud. As a result of that, I've been in the delivery of cloud space for a very long time, but I really wanted to move into much more of a focus on the consumption of cloud and much more of a focus on the types of applications that enterprises are building and the needs that they have in this space. And so after looking at a number of opportunities, my good friend and mentor, Tom Lunabos at SOASTA, asked if I was interested in coming on board to do sort of a really interesting project related to how the measurement of applications, these large-scale applications, distributed applications, how the monitoring and the performance management can be applied to answering some very, very big questions, not only in operations, but also in the business side. So can this be correlated? Can this performance data be correlated to outcomes like conversion or ad viewability, the things that businesses make money off of? Can it be correlated to things like inventory requirements? I'll note that Netflix has famously told the story about the fact that they're scaling Trigger for scaling their front-end system that you interact with to select movies is not CPU load or memory utilization, it's demand for movies. That's what they're monitoring, which is a business metric. So the question becomes, are there business metrics in other businesses that should be the key triggers to operational concerns? and how can we find those correlations? How can we sort of relatively scientifically anyway begin to identify and plot what statistically is going to give the best results and most optimal results for a business? Because what we do know beyond a shadow of doubt is that performance affects revenue in online businesses and digital businesses. I mean, speed is money. There's no doubt about it. It's been proven many times over. So then the question becomes, how can you begin to optimize and tweak that? Where should you focus your attention when it comes to performance and performance tuning and optimization? Sometimes it's really surprising that the page that has the most effect on revenue on your online web commerce site may not be the most viewed page. Yeah. It may be a page that you didn't expect actually was the most important one to focus your energy in. It may not even be the slowest page. And so from that perspective, I'm doing a lot of things right now, first and foremost, initially with a really interesting problem for me, one that I didn't realize was as big a problem as it is, which is the integration of data in a way that you can, begin to bring this together in real time to get correlations between, say, Adobe Analytics and SOASTA mPulse, which is a real user monitoring environment.
Yeah. So before we go down that path too far, for anybody who doesn't know SOASTA, give us the basics, because I know I got to know the company several years ago. I think there was some of the iPhone launches, and there was a couple of some big web events, and Tom was on Twitter and other things, sort of talking about what people had done to sort of pre-test. But give people a sense of who the company is first, and then we'll kind of dig into kind of the thing that ties into the business piece of this. Yeah.
So the SOASTA's focus as a company is on digital performance. So there's a new category that's being spun up by the kind of kicked off by Forbes. Forrester's doing some formal work in sort of defining players in the space called digital performance management. And the concept of digital performance management that's different than application performance management is it's really about managing the performance of the digital business, managing the performance in the context of this being a business asset. And so is a lot more tied not only to monitoring, which is where traditionally APM has come from, but also then in terms of being able to do development and testing and continuous integration, continuous testing to verify that you are actually going to meet the parameters. So you measure to understand not only the behavior of the system, but also to get a picture of where are your performance areas that have the most effect on revenue. You then develop to adjust to those parameters, and then you verify through generally through testing, not only performance tests in traditional load testing sense, but also in terms of other types of stress tests and baseline measuring tests that give you a really good understanding of how your system behaves under varying workloads or under varying conditions, geographies, devices, browsers, things like that. So our focus is really on this sort of cycle, this life cycle of understanding and measuring how your system exists with the customer. What's the customer's perception of performance, and how does that affect the outcomes that you're getting? And then having the tools and the capabilities to allow you to use that as a feedback cycle to then affect development and affect prioritization, everything from prioritization of work to actual code performance and other things, and being able to verify that in order to be able to change those outcomes.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting to me because I sometimes we make these overgeneralizations. We'll say, hey, the world is becoming very digital. There's a lot of digital, a lot of business is digital. What's interesting to me, and I'd be curious, is sort of your insight. You've only been there for a handful of months now. You take any company, like on the front page of your homepage, I think there's a kind of a good case study, video case study of Macy's. It's either Macy's or Nordstrom's. I'll get it confused. But you've worked in product management for, even though they're software products, they still go through these sort of normal channels. You've got physical sales reps, you've got channel partners, you've got customers. Like, how much different or how much opening of your eyes are you now seeing when the the product that the business itself, the front end of something like a Nordstrom's or anybody else is all digital? Like, how much different is that understanding of the business when you have those kind of metrics? You've got insight into, like you said, which pages are the most popular, which ones aren't the most popular, how long does anybody spend there? That stuff you just can't get from saying, that you can't get out of Salesforce.com because, you're tracking your salespeople. That to me is really a fascinating space.
It's huge. The number one thing that's just amazing about doing direct business digitally with the customer is that the customer's outcome directly becomes the conversation linchpin between the business and the technical operation, right? So it becomes, if you look at the metrics the business captures, revenue, cost of goods sold, those kinds of things, none of those really help the technical organization very much. If you look at the metrics that are purely technical, like CPU utilization or the energy cost of the data center or those kinds of things, none of that helps the business determine their outcomes. But if you look at things like conversion, if you look at things like indexing and scoring, which pages have the greatest effect on conversion. If you look at understanding how third-party components come into play in terms of enabling conversion, and not just in terms of conversion, but also in terms of page views, also in terms of unique visitors, also in terms of a number of other metrics that matter, depending on what business that you're in. Those are directly measurable from the business front end, and they are also then directly applicable and correlatable. It can be correlated directly with either business metrics for the business to do further analysis or technical metrics for technology to do further metrics. And what I love about that is more than ever now, if technology organization wants to understand how to prioritize their work to have the most effect on positive outcomes in the business, you can have a data-driven conversation about that. That's very difficult to have, as you know, when you've got sales reps, channel partners, a number of other things coming into play that have to be dealt with. This is an opportunity of a lifetime. It's not going to replace sales reps and channels, but for a lot of businesses out there, this is a huge opportunity to have a conversation that can be tuned through feedback mechanisms to really, really engage with the customer in a way that it makes it very easy to do business. Right. And that's going to convert to revenue as much as anything.
Yep, that's massive. So last summer I was out at the Velocity conference. It was in San Jose or Santa Clara or somewhere. And Velocity tends to be a very sort of operation show. You go in the main floor, the booth, and there's your regular trade show sort of stuff and booths and stuff. And then I sort of turned the corner, and there was this enormous command center looking booth, and it was, probably 20 feet tall of displays and graphics and stuff that looked like the kind of things you would see like in mission control for a movie to Mars or Space Shuttle or something. And I got to poke it around, and you guys had just announced this thing called mPulse. It was. The easiest word for me to sort of explain it was the first time at any operations show I'd sort of been able to connect the dots visually between this is what's going on with the bits and bytes and the computers and the CPUs and memory and a bunch of business metrics. And to me, it was fascinating. Talk a little bit about what that thing is and what was the impetus for you guys to move from kind of being test and performance centric to essentially sort of stepping up the stack, if you will.
Yeah, well, so let me clarify a little bit about the product line. So we have our testing products, Cloud Test, which is cloud-driven web testing, performance and load testing, Touch Test, which is functional testing and some performance testing capability for mobile. And we have mPulse, which is our real user measurement environment, which is a product that's available online. It's different than the displays. I'll display that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But mPulse is the heart and soul of measuring real user outcomes. Every single user transaction that's initiated with your site, you can measure every aspect of it. And we keep that data for forever or for as long as you want to, if you have data retention policies around that. But you can do a tremendous amount of analysis, deep analysis of what the actual user experiences have been and what the outliers are and everything. Now, what you saw was what we call our Digital Operations Center, or DOC. The Digital Operations Center is at the heart and soul of what you're talking about here, which is bringing together and allowing for quick correlation around not only what happens in an event like an outage or a slowdown, or perhaps just monitoring what's going on during Black Monday, or any of those kinds of seasonal elements. The doc is really, it's an environment where you can bring together all of those metrics and measurement capabilities, and be able to do three things that are really critical, right? So one is to be able to capture all that information into one place, and to be able to share it, to be able to collaborate on the data that you're seeing there, and being able to correlate that data. So both visually, so in a number of situations you may look and be able to correlate, hey, there's an event going on with, maybe you're very weather sensitive business. So you're watching the weather channel in one panel and you can see that something's going on that may be triggering behavior that you're seeing in the system. But sometimes it's also direct, analyzed correlation, where we have a product called our Data Science Workbench, which sits with a number of our products, where you can actually build, ad hoc correlations between different data sets. And when you find those things that are valuable, that actually have a correlation and a relationship, then you can display those as, a graph on this set of displays. So where you have an operations center, suddenly it's not just monitoring technical metrics of what's going on, but it's a real powerful, multi-dimensional way of being able to display what's going on with your business at any given time. And you can have different views. You can have a view for the DevOps team or for the operations team. You can have a view for the marketing organization. You can have a view for the digital business unit that's looking a little bit more maybe specifically at how the technology and the offerings are being brought together, and that power of bringing that together is, we have a number of early customers that are very excitedly sort of ramping up their use of it already. And we're still just dealing with the first handful of customers in terms of deployments. It's a very powerful medium. So part of my job is to find things that we can bring to specific industries like retail and media and finance, and that are specific correlations that make sense in those industry things. Say in retail, for instance, Adobe Analytics is which is Omniture. Omniture's current name. Yep. It's everywhere, right? And so, what are the correlations between customer outcomes and performance that we can bring to bear and bring forward in that environment? So it's a very exciting, and it's cool to watch. If you ever get a chance at a conference, so for your listeners to get a chance for a conference to go see it in action, go watch a demo of it being manipulated. It's really, really powerful. It's not a static thing at all. It's a very alive and aware environment for correlating what's going on in your digital business.
Yeah, no, that is it's very powerful, especially if, like you said, you can take some of these tools that the marketing team or some other discipline, the sort of non-IT disciplines are using, and then correlate them to what's going on in the I like to call it sort of the digital bits factory. It's the same
right.
thing that Henry Ford probably would have loved to be able to do between his sales reps back in the 1900s and what was going on in the factory, and figuring out, were they walking past the black cars? Were they walking past the red cars? And if so, start painting more red cars or something like that.
Right. And we're looking at really cool things like we have people sort of saying, we'd like to be able to react a couple of different ways. We'd like to be able to react to demand for a given good by being able to scale, systems in a more partitioned fashion than having to scale the entire environment for every product, right? So they can divide out the products that they're offering as different service sets in a microservices environment. And be able to to scale more optimally that way by understanding exactly what's going on in terms of system demand and performance.
Yeah.
So So all of that is super cool, and this is, to me, that you bring it all together, and really, this is a big thing you're going to hear from us in coming weeks. Is it's really a platform for performance management, for digital performance management, right? You bring these pieces together, and now you can start building new capabilities, integrating with other data systems, especially. But you can build new capabilities to do things like integrate some level of performance testing with every build. Right, it doesn't have to be a full-scale load test, but you can do enough to do some basic stress verification and move on. And all of that is, the APIs are there in the set of products and the capabilities, and you've got the dock as a front end to kind of bring everybody together to see all these different pieces and parts.
Yep. So you've mentioned DevOps, you've mentioned microservices. We've sort of checked those buzzwords off, but SOASTA's not really. I mean, you guys are in the application space, so we're not talking about infrastructure. But you guys aren't really a sort of an APM per se. I mean, there's companies like New Relic who dig way down in the guts of the code and the app. Like, what's the difference for anybody that maybe sort of new to the space or isn't sure the difference between what a lot? I mean, there's Datadog just took a $95 million round of funding. There's New Relic. They went. Where does SOASTA fit, and who's the type of people that that love your product or curious about your product or benefit from it?
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting question, and it's pretty straightforward, which is our focus has always been on understanding the performance of the environment from the perspective of operations and from the perspective of the digital business and the business owners that are trying to understand and measure performance, not in terms of lines of code and execution of code, but more in terms of what the user's experience is and what the user's outcome is. So we absolutely partner, and integrate with, at the very least, all of the major APM players. For that very reason. So there's a really good, strong relationship between SOASTA, taking advantage of the data that you can get from the APM tools to understand and be able to troubleshoot what's going on in code. But really the focus of what we're doing is to say, this has got to be tested at large scale to understand it. The testing environment has to be built and tuned in a way that it reflects real world usage. And so bringing together mPulse for the testing and measurement from a user perspective, and bringing together the testing environments along with providing all of that to not only a very technical developer and operations audience, but making that available and easier to consume for more of a business or a business operations audience is very, very important and very much our focus in terms of what we're doing. So, our focus is not on getting to the lines of code in the back end. Our focus is on understanding how the front end breaks down. And this is really important, Brian, in big part because when you look at how a web page is built or even a mobile app is built today, third-party content is growing like crazy. I mean, there's hardly a page out there now that doesn't have, some number of third-party elements. We've seen as many as I think, it's in the many tens of third-party elements on some pages. And so if you're just measuring the back end, you're never going to see performance issues that are brought up by that very well. If you have a really solid measure of the front end and what those things are and how they're affecting overall behavior, not only of the loading of the page, but then of the customer's experience and where they go next, you can do a much better job of understanding what third-party content matters and what third-party content just gets in the way, right? And which providers do a better job. We're doing a lot of work right now with some of the early vendors in the ad viewability space, the third-party verification space, because viewability is huge in the media side in terms of ad selling and ad buying. It's becoming the metric that people want to move to. And so, being able to understand, well, so how does the overall page load affect viewability, and how does viewability affect, getting the viewability you want affect the outcomes in terms of what the user does next? And those are very important questions that can't really be answered very well by APM today. in the way that it's done. That's why, a lot of them are trying to add real user management capability into what they have. We've got, not only do we have one of the most established real user management capabilities, but we have the one that stores data forever instead of dropping it after a certain number of days, which is very unique.
Right. Let me ask you one last question, and this one may go a little bit, but I think it's really interesting. So, if you talk to digital native companies, a lot of these concepts, how long do you keep data? Are you going to build systems that interact with third parties through APIs and so forth? Like that stuff kind of is natural to them. It's native to them. It's the way they think about stuff. We're starting to see a lot of companies who, you could talk about somebody like a retailer or a bank or something and say, well, you've never really been to the, like you're evolving in technology because the web interface was who you were. But now we're seeing stuff like automotive manufacturers where the digital experience is going to become the differentiator. We're going to see a lot of stuff like how do those conversations go with companies like that where you have to do so much educating or do you have to do a ton of educating of them? And then, how important is it to make that education not just about the technology, but teaching them about, this is the way your business is going to be going forward, and these are the kind of things we can help you with.
I think you'd be surprised. I think our experience right now is that most traditional, our biggest markets are retail, e-commerce, media, financial. And we've got a number of others as well, but we've got, I think, 41 or 42 of the online retail top 100 sites use SOASTA to do either their testing or monitoring or both. And so, but as we talk to these companies, what they have come to the conclusion that they have seen the evidence that says that performance affects outcomes, right? They know. In fact, we just got another piece of evidence back not very long ago from some work that we've done with a partner that shows that without a doubt, when you look at all the factors of a page, the geography that it's loading from, the geography it's loading to, a number of other things, that nothing correlates as well to outcome as the performance of the page overall. And so they get it. But the problem is they don't have the skill set on staff. They don't have the capability to go out and have a performance team that really digs in and makes that 100% of what they do. And there's not a lot of people to go out there and get there that can make that productive on day one. So what they're really doing is they're coming to us and saying, can you guys help us do this, or can you guys do this for us? Can you guys provide us with the services capability that will put you guys in charge of understanding our performance, communicating that to us, and also then, taking action to help us prioritize the work to begin to address those performance issues and to tune that over time. And so we have a strong services capability as well that's tuned to helping our customers do that. We have a number of different offerings that will help a company assess what's going on with performance, assess culturally and organizationally what they need to do to address those performance issues and to put a plan in place. And we can even manage an element of that performance management process for them. So that's really the biggest surprise, is that these organizations, they're really starting to get it very quickly. They often hope there's a trick or a tip or something that will come through, but what they realize is this is a constant, as much as the functionality is a constant dynamic change. The performance and the performance needs and the issues that have to be addressed are constantly performance and dynamic environment. So we have to always be measuring, always be adjusting, always be testing in order to be able to stay ahead of the curve with in terms of our site performance. So it's really, there's education in terms of what does it take to have a high performant organization when it comes to digital performance. There is some education in terms of the approaches that need to be taken, but the need, we don't have that problem like I've had in some of the other industries, right, that I've been in, where you have to kind of educate people that you have this problem, you just don't know it yet. For a lot of organizations, they know they have an issue, they have something that needs to be addressed. The biggest thing that they don't know is that the way they're doing it now is going to fail. and that they have, unless they put the right tools and the right capabilities in place, they're not going to be able to keep up with the competition and keep up with their market.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating space. I'd love to, maybe sort of last thing. Are there 2 or 3 simple first steps that anybody that's kind of new to this space should be taking beyond, getting the right tools? Is it, especially if you're thinking about stuff that's mobile, because mobile, doesn't have access to the same bandwidth. It doesn't have access to, it's got inconsistencies of, roaming and moving around. I mean, like any sort of James's 2 or 3 tips that you're constantly hearing or saying all the time to people that people kind of take away and go, okay, cool. These are stuff I should be doing as well as, engaging with you guys.
Well, I'll say that the biggest trove of information that I know of out there on this is the SOASTA blog. So definitely encourage people to go check that out. Tammy Everts and her team are very, very not only prolific, but they've got some phenomenally good content for breaking these kinds of problems down for everything from web performance to mobile performance. But I will say, for when you look at understanding front end versus back end performance, right? There's really 3 types of testing out there that can be used on these lines. There's the real user testing that I talked about before, in which you're basically going to measure everything that's actually going on out there. But if you're trying to do more scientific control, understanding of what's going on in the environment, then you'd like to be able to do a more controlled situation where you control the initial parameters more than you can just by measuring everybody. So there's the concept of synthetic users and synthetic user testing that's useful for very specific tasks within that parameter. You need some control in order to be able to understand it. And then there's the concept of virtual users, which is really, basically driving users against the back end for like you would for load testing, but doing it in production for baseline not only of performance but also of behavior and some other things as well. And that's an environment where you're really not testing the front end directly very much. You're not testing the mobile app, but you're testing how the back end performs. The combination of the information you get from all 3 was going to give you a very, very strong picture of what's going on. And you can do a tremendous amount just with RUM and performance testing. I think it's a really important thing to understand. But you add synthetic in and you get another nuance that's very important. So first, understand the environment, measure the environment, understand what the real behavior is and how your system responds to the behavior. The second thing then is to understand that this is a dynamic thing. So what you want to do is have people, hopefully a team, or hopefully at least people with roles related to making sure that performance is being monitored and measured and then tested correctly, that you're testing the right things, testing the things that have the most effect on the outcomes of your application in terms of performance. So for your mobile app, you want to make sure that you're not just making sure that the mobile app is functionally correct, but that as it functions with the back end, that performance and that experience is really seamless. And the third thing I'll say is manage your third-party components. Understand how they affect your page and your mobile app outcomes. Don't just put those in there expecting them, because they're coming from a third party selling to multiple people, that they're going to be both performant and have a positive outcome what's going on. Some of that's A/B testing, but some of that's actually measuring and monitoring what goes on with these third party components within your pages, within your mobile applications, in order to be able to understand whether they're beneficial or they're a problem. Yeah. So those are key things.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, listen, I know at some point we need to have you back on. We want to talk about, one of your passions. We'll talk about complex systems and how it gets into all of this stuff, because at the end of the day, we've got this really cool thing going on where people are building more software and faster software. And the flip side of that is, things become chaotic when you have lots more moving pieces and things are changing rapidly. And would love to get your insights and some real feedback and stuff. But we'll have to do that sort of as a full show again sometime later this year.
I'd love to do that. We might even be able to get some good people together and have a panel discussion about it, because I think it would be a fascinating question. Yeah. So, but thank you very much, Brian. I always appreciate the chance to be on the podcast, and it was a good conversation. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, great. So, folks, we're going to wrap that that up. As always, a reminder, we've got about 3.5 weeks till the Krispy Kreme. If you're interested in making any sort of donations to help the Children's Hospital, always appreciate that. Always appreciate everybody listening and telling a friend about the show. And thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.